I wasn't supposed to be home that early. Technically, I wasn't supposed to be home at all until later that night. A client meeting in Midtown had been scheduled to run long into the afternoon, followed by traffic and maybe a drink at the bar near my office. But the meeting got scrapped last minute. Client had a personal emergency, some vague excuse, and I found myself with hours to spare and nowhere to be. Instead of going back to work, I decided to do something small and thoughtful. Something nice. I stopped by Brooke's favorite bakery, the little hole in the wall on Maple, where she always made me try a new flavor even though we both knew she'd end up stealing mine. I bought 2 almond croissants, fresh out of the oven, warm and sweet in the paper bag. Stupid, right? Just a guy bringing his girlfriend a couple pastries on a random weekday afternoon. I didn't expect it to be the thing that unraveled everything. When I opened the front door, the apartment was strangely still. Too still. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, the eerie kind that makes your gut tighten before your brain can catch up. No music, no TV, no clinking dishes. Just silence. I stepped inside and set the bag on the kitchen counter. That's when I heard it. A man's voice. Low and casual, almost playful, drifting from the direction of the bedroom. There was a soft chuckle followed by the unmistakable creak of the mattress. Then a murmur, words I couldn't make out, and a rustle as if someone had suddenly gone still. My heart sank so fast I felt it in my knees. At first, I told myself I'd misunderstood. Maybe it was a podcast. A video. Maybe she had a friend over, though Brooke didn't really have male friends. Not ones who laughed in her bedroom when they thought they were alone. Then the bathroom door opened and Brooke stepped into the hallway wrapped in a white towel with her wet hair hanging in clumps over her shoulders. She blinked when she saw me, eyes wide for half a second before her expression settled into something neutral. Not guilty. Not shocked. Just blank. Hey, she said casually, tightening the towel as she walked further into the apartment like nothing was out of the ordinary. You're back early. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. She smiled tight and too quick and added, Ashley stopped by. Her apartment heaters busted again and she needed a quick shower before her shift. Ashley. The name dropped like a stone between us. Brooke turned toward the kitchen, grabbing a glass from the cabinet like she hadn't just fed me the most half-baked excuse I'd ever heard. I stood there, still holding my keys, my fingers digging into my palm. I could feel every single heartbeat, loud and steady, thudding against my ribs. I wanted to ask who the man was. I wanted to ask why her voice was so calm, why she looked at me like I was the one interrupting her day. But I didn't. Instead, I looked at her neck. There was a faint red smudge just above her collarbone. A little out of place. It wasn't lipstick, at least, not hers. Brooke didn't wear that shade. And even if she did, I hadn't kissed her there that morning. I hadn't kissed her at all now that I thought about it. Suddenly, all the pieces rearranged themselves. The extra hour she spent at the gym that made no difference to her shape. The sudden obsession with new lingerie I never got to see. The random girls' nights that came with vague locations and half-baked alibis. The way she always carried her phone face down. How she started locking the bathroom door, something she'd never done in the 3 years we'd lived together. And now this. I felt my jaw tighten, but I said nothing. I walked over to the counter and picked up the bakery bag, holding it out toward her. Brought you croissants, I said, my voice steady but not warm. She took a small step forward, reaching for the bag, but I pulled it back before she could grab it. You might want to save them for your date, I added, meeting her eyes directly. That's when she froze. Just like that, gone was the performance, the casual act. Her lips parted slightly, her pupils dilated, and her knuckles went white where they clutched the towel. Her expression collapsed in a blink, like a mask falling off too fast. She didn't ask what I meant. She didn't argue. She didn't even say the guy's name. She just stood there, suspended in panic, waiting to see what I'd do next. But I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I didn't even ask. Because I didn't need to. I set the bag down slowly on the counter. Then I walked past her toward the hallway without brushing against her. I didn't look back. I didn't say another word. I felt her eyes on my back the whole way down the hall, but I didn't give her the satisfaction of a second glance. I closed the door behind me and sat down on the edge of the bed, the same bed I'd heard creak minutes ago under someone else's weight. I stared at the floor for a long time, long enough to hear the bathroom faucet run again, long enough to hear the faint, hurried shuffle of feet as someone, him, left through the back. It was all happening too fast, and yet it felt like time had stopped. In the quiet, I finally let the truth settle around me like dust on forgotten furniture. I didn't need proof. I didn't need an explanation or a name or a timeline. I didn't need Brooke to lie or cry or beg. Because the worst part wasn't that it had happened. It was how easy it was for her to act like it hadn't. And now, sitting there in that silence, I realized something brutal. I hadn't just walked into betrayal. I'd walked into a performance I wasn't even supposed to see. I sat at the kitchen table long after the apartment went quiet. The croissants were still there, untouched, cooling inside their little white bag like they had any business being part of the story. I couldn't bring myself to throw them away, but I sure as hell wasn't going to eat them either. I just sat, staring at them, at the crease in the paper, the faint oily stain bleeding through the bottom. They looked smaller than before. Or maybe I just felt smaller. Brooke didn't come out of the bedroom for a long time. At some point, I heard the back door close. I didn't know if it was her or him, and I didn't care enough to check. My mind wasn't focused on who was in the hallway or what she was saying to cover her tracks. My mind was locked in rewind, digging into every moment I had pushed aside for the sake of keeping things together. Every moment I dismissed because I didn't want to be that guy, the suspicious boyfriend, the paranoid wreck. But maybe I should have been. I don't know exactly when things started to go wrong. It wasn't like a switch flipped. It was more like a slow leak, something quiet and insidious, barely noticeable until the floorboards were warped and you couldn't breathe without tasting mold. At first, it was the little stuff. She used to make coffee for both of us every morning, even if she was running late. Then it was just hers. Then she started drinking matcha. Then nothing. No coffee, no conversation, just silence or whatever upbeat song she blasted through her Bluetooth speaker as she got ready without looking in my direction. We used to send texts throughout the day. Dumb stuff, memes, random thoughts, miss you, or can't wait to see you. That stopped too. I was the one reaching out first, more often than not. Half the time, she'd leave me on read. I started telling myself she was just busy. And her phone. God, her phone. Brooke used to leave it everywhere. On the kitchen table, the couch, the bathroom counter. Unlocked, face up, careless. Somewhere along the way, that changed. Suddenly, it was always in her hand or stuffed deep in her bag. Notifications turned off. Screen dimmed. And the password changed conveniently after an update. But I said nothing. I swallowed the lump in my throat and told myself people evolve, schedules shift, comfort replaces infatuation. That was normal, right? Then came the gym. She started going in the evenings. At first, it made sense. She said it helped her unwind after work. But suddenly, it wasn't just a 45-minute workout. It was 2 hours. Then 3. Always at night. Always too sore to hang out after. And God forbid I suggested we go together, she'd laugh it off or say it was her time. Once I offered to pick her up afterward and she snapped at me. "I'm not a teenager, Ryan," she said. "You don't need to babysit me." So I stopped asking. Then it was her wardrobe. She'd always had style, sure, but suddenly everything was cropped tighter, cut lower, showing more skin in the name of confidence. I wasn't against it. I mean, she looked amazing, but it felt performative. Like she was dressing for someone specific. Someone who wasn't me. She started disappearing on weekends too. Girls' nights. Brunches. Spa days. Always vague. Never with friends I knew. Once I asked who she was meeting and she gave me this annoyed look like I was asking her to recite the Constitution. "You don't know them," she'd said, grabbing her bag like I'd offended her by even wondering. Then came the cancellations. Dinner plans? Too tired. Movie night? Something came up. The beach trip we'd planned for months? Can we reschedule? I really need some alone time. But alone time never included me. I should have known. I did know. Somewhere in my gut, I always knew. But I didn't want to admit it. Because once you admit something's broken, you have to deal with it. You can't go back to pretending the cracks are just shadows. So I did what people do when they're trying not to drown. I treaded water. I filled the silence with podcasts. I threw myself into work. I stayed up late scrolling through nonsense on my phone just so I wouldn't have to face the empty space beside me in bed. I convinced myself this was just a rough patch. That if I held on long enough, if I just loved her hard enough, she'd find her way back. She didn't. And now, sitting at that table, I realized she'd been gone for a long time. What happened earlier wasn't a surprise. It was a confirmation. A final, damning puzzle piece clicking into place. All those little things I tried to explain away. They weren't symptoms of disconnection. They were evidence. A breadcrumb trail leading straight to someone else's hands. The worst part? I let it happen. I ignored the signs, smoothed over the tension, kept hoping the version of Brooke I'd fallen in love with would come back. But the truth is, she hadn't disappeared. She'd just moved on. I stayed there for what felt like hours, the croissants still sitting between us like some cruel symbol of what I thought we still were. Eventually, I stood up, grabbed a napkin, and threw the pastries in the trash. Not in anger, just necessity. I walked past our photo wall, the one we put up when we first moved in. Us on the hiking trail in Vermont, drenched in rain and laughing. Us at her cousin's wedding, sweaty from dancing. Us in the kitchen, flour in our hair from that one attempt at homemade pasta. The photos were all still there, still smiling, but they weren't us anymore. They were fossils. That night, I slept on the couch with the lights off and my phone face down. I didn't want music. I didn't want a podcast. I didn't want anything, just stillness. At some point around 3 a.m., I heard her moving in the hallway. Her door closed quietly. She didn't say goodnight. She didn't ask if I was okay. I guess we both knew the answer. It had been 2 days. 2 long, jagged days. Brooke and I coexisted in silence, orbiting around each other like we were strangers forced to share a space out of obligation, not affection. She didn't bring up what happened. She didn't try to explain, didn't offer more lies, and certainly didn't apologize. In a way, I think she was waiting to see what I'd do. If I'd erupt, confront her, storm out. But I didn't. I think that unsettled her more than any shouting match ever could. I didn't scream. I observed. And when the moment came, I didn't go looking for confirmation. It just happened. I was trying to print out an itinerary. We'd had a trip planned to Seattle next month. Just a short escape. Something Brooke had insisted on booking back when things still felt salvageable. Or maybe it was her way of keeping up appearances. Either way, I'd forgotten to cancel the flights, and now I needed the confirmation email to process the refund. She'd left her laptop on the dining table. I figured I'd use hers rather than go digging for mine. I opened the lid, not expecting anything. Just a quick search through her inbox, print the email, close the laptop, move on. But the screen lit up, and the browser was already open. She hadn't closed it. Right there, sitting front and center, was a conversation thread. No password needed. No Face ID. Just a blinking cursor in an open message window. I stared at it for a second before I realized what I was looking at. The name at the top of the thread was Alex. Just that, Alex. No last name. No profile picture. Just a name and a conversation that scrolled for pages. And the moment my eyes caught a few of the words, I knew. This wasn't a coworker. This wasn't a cousin. This wasn't innocent. It was int asterisk mate. Effortlessly so. I scrolled slowly, not even knowing why I was doing it. Maybe I thought there'd be some detail that would explain it all. Something to help me understand how I'd missed this. But no, there wasn't. The messages were raw, casual, and familiar. They talked like people who'd known each other a long time, comfortably and carelessly. There were inside jokes, nicknames, references to last Tuesday and that little room at the Palomar, followed by a winking emoji. Photos, too. Some tame, some less so, none of which were meant for my eyes. There was one photo of her in the mirror, in the lingerie I once bought for her birthday but never saw her wear again. She was smiling in it. A real smile. The kind I hadn't seen in months. It hit me like a punch to the ribs. There was no hesitation in her words to him. No guilt. Just pure, unfiltered excitement. She asked about his day. She told him she missed his voice. She mentioned how she nearly called him last night. Just to hear you breathe. Couldn't breathe. Alex called her B. He said things like, I slept better with your skin in my head. He thanked her for making Tuesday perfect. Brooke responded, You always make me feel like I'm the only woman in the world. I stopped reading after that. I didn't close the tab. I didn't delete anything. I didn't print the itinerary. I just shut the laptop slowly and pushed it an inch away from me, like it was a live grenade I'd almost tripped over. Then I got up, walked out the front door, and didn't stop until I hit cold air. No coat, no keys, no phone. Just my shoes and the keys I'd left dangling in the door lock. The street was quiet, blanketed in a kind of stillness that felt almost too clean. The breeze cut through my shirt, but I didn't feel it. Not really. My head was on fire, my stomach a lead weight. My hands were trembling. I walked past the grocery store where she once made us take a photo with a cart full of snacks for the road trip that never happened. Past the park bench we sat on the night we decided to move in together. past the bookstore where I used to buy her dumb poetry books that she never finished but always smiled about. And the whole time I couldn't shake the thought that I was the punchline to a joke I didn't even know I was in. It wasn't just the affair. That would have been bad enough. It was how easy it all seemed for her. How she maintained two parallel lives without missing a beat. How she lied so efficiently it became part of her routine. How she looked me in the eye every day and still managed to send messages like, "You always know how to ruin me," to someone else when I was standing 10 feet away. There was no accident. No drunken mistake. This was a second life. A complete, intentional, planned-out life. She hadn't cheated in a moment of weakness. She'd replaced me. I ended up sitting on a park bench just outside the corner diner we used to visit after Sunday hikes. I watched people go in and out, mothers with strollers, college kids laughing over milkshakes, an old couple holding hands. Everyone living their little stories, unaware that mine had just imploded. The worst part? I wasn't angry. Not yet anyway. I was empty. There was no rush of rage, no primal scream building in my chest. Just a crushing stillness. I didn't even cry. I think I wanted to. I just couldn't. My brain hadn't caught up to my heart yet. I just sat there, staring at the sidewalk, trying to make sense of the fact that my entire reality had tilted and no one else even noticed. I thought about confronting her. About going back and slamming the laptop shut in front of her, pointing to the screen and asking her to read it out loud. But what would that do? What could she possibly say that wouldn't make it worse? There were no explanations that could fix this. No apologies that would feel real. No version of events that would make me believe she hadn't stopped choosing me long ago. So instead, I stayed out until the sun started dipping low and then I walked home. She wasn't there when I got back. Good. I didn't want to see her. I grabbed a blanket from the hall closet and crashed on the couch again. No music. No lights. Just silence. This time, it felt less like peace and more like surrender. The laptop stayed right where I left it. I hoped she opened it. I hoped she saw the open tab and knew I had read every word. And I hoped for just 1 second she felt the way I did. Utterly alone. I didn't plan on leaving that night, but I couldn't stay. The air in our apartment felt poisoned, thick with everything left unsaid. I couldn't sit there on that couch again, staring at the ceiling like it held answers. I couldn't walk into our bedroom and pretend that bed hadn't been shared. I couldn't pretend the smell of her shampoo didn't make my stomach twist anymore. So I packed a bag. Just a small one. Some clothes, my toothbrush, the laptop, mine, not hers, and the pair of running shoes I hadn't touched in months. I didn't slam the door. I didn't leave a note. I didn't need to. She knew. I called my cousin Elliot on the drive. He answered halfway through the second ring. "Hey man," I said, trying to keep my voice from shaking. "You mind if I crash for a while?" There was a pause, just long enough to worry me. Then, "Yeah. Of course. You okay?" "No," I said. "Not really." He didn't ask anything else. Just gave me the address again, even though I'd been there 100 times, and said he'd keep the porch light on. Elliot's place was chaos in the best possible way. 2 kids under 7, a dog that barked at its own reflection, and furniture that looked like it had survived a tornado of juice boxes and Lego bricks. His wife, Dana, hugged me at the door and didn't let go for a few seconds too long. I didn't tell them what happened. Not all of it. Just said Brooke and I were going through some stuff. Elliot nodded like he understood, and Dana gave me that soft, knowing look women have when they've already guessed the truth but won't make you say it out loud. The first night, I slept in their basement on a fold-out couch that felt like concrete. I didn't care. It was still better than the bed I'd shared with Brooke. Better than the silence I'd left behind. The next morning, their youngest came in and asked if I was the sad guy. I laughed, more out of surprise than amusement. "Guess I am," I told him, ruffling his hair. I tried to keep a routine. I helped Elliot make breakfast, even though the pancakes looked like abstract art. I took the dog on long walks. I read bedtime stories, changed light bulbs, fixed a leaky sink. I did everything except think about Brooke. But it didn't work. Not really. Because the thoughts still came. They came when I saw the kids' drawings taped to the fridge, reminders of a future Brooke and I used to talk about. They came when I made coffee in the morning and realized I didn't know how she took hers anymore. They came when I rolled over on the couch and reached out instinctively for someone who wasn't there. Grief doesn't wait for silence. It breaks in even when the house is full. On the third day, it found me in the form of an email. It was from Brooke. The subject line was blank. Just her name and a timestamp, 1:12 a.m. I stared at it for a while before opening it, half hoping it would say nothing. Half hoping it would say everything. It didn't. It started like this. "You left. I wasn't expecting that. That alone pissed me off. Like she thought I'd just swallow everything and stay put. Like I was supposed to absorb her betrayal in silence and still keep the lights on for her return. The rest of the email wasn't an apology. Not even close. She blamed me. She said she felt emotionally abandoned. That I had checked out months ago. That we'd become roommates, not lovers. She didn't mention Alex by name, but the subtext was clear. If you had just tried harder, maybe I wouldn't have needed someone else. Needed. That word stuck in my throat like a shard of glass. She called her affair a connection. Said it helped her feel alive again. Said it wasn't about S*X, as if that made it better. As if emotional intimacy with another man was somehow a lesser betrayal. She closed the message with, I hope you find what you're looking for even if it isn't me. I stared at that sentence for a long time. Not because it hurt, but because I'd already realized I had been looking. For months. Maybe longer. Searching for the version of her that had disappeared, wondering if I was crazy for noticing, for grieving someone who was still physically there but emotionally unreachable. Brooke didn't vanish in one night. She faded, piece by piece. And I'd been carrying the weight of her absence like it was my failure. I closed the laptop and didn't respond. There was nothing worth responding to. Elliot found me on the back porch that night, sitting on a lawn chair with a beer I wasn't drinking. You want to talk about it? He asked, sitting next to me. I shook my head. Not yet. He nodded, then handed me another beer anyway. We sat there in silence, listening to the buzz of a faulty bug zapper and the occasional squeal of a kid fighting bedtime upstairs. The noise was strangely comforting. Honest. Unfiltered. No pretending. Eventually, Elliot broke the quiet. You know, he said, everyone thinks the worst part of betrayal is the moment you find out. I looked over, waiting. It's not, he continued. It's realizing how much you ignored to keep things from falling apart. I didn't say anything. I just nodded. Because he was right. The betrayal wasn't the knife. It was the realization that I'd been handing it to her, over and over, hoping she wouldn't use it. The next few days passed like that. Uneventful but heavy. I stayed out of her social media. Didn't check her stories. Didn't ask mutual friends what she was doing or who she was with. Detachment didn't come from strength. It came from necessity. When someone makes it clear they don't value you, the hardest thing isn't leaving. It's believing them. I started running again early mornings before the kids woke up. It hurt like hell at first. My knees complained, my lungs burned, and every step felt like penance. But by the third run, something clicked. Not in a joyful, cinematic way. Just in a quiet, grounding one. My feet hit pavement, my breath fell into rhythm, and for the first time in weeks, my mind didn't spiral. That afternoon, I got another email from Brooke. I didn't open it. I archived it without reading a single word. Not out of pettiness. Not because I didn't care. Because I finally understood that whatever version of love I'd been holding onto, it was gone. She let it. Not in a single moment, but in 1,000 tiny, silent decisions. And now all I had left was space. Painful, unfamiliar, empty space. But even that was better than lies. When I finally went back to the apartment, it didn't feel like coming home. It felt like returning to a crime scene, except the victim was a version of me I didn't recognize anymore, and the suspect had packed up her things and vanished without a trace. Well, almost without a trace. The first thing I noticed was the smell. It was different. Less perfume, more plastic wrap and lemon-scented cleaner. The kind of sterile air you get from someone trying to erase their presence in a hurry. The second thing I noticed was the quiet. Not the kind I'd been carrying with me, the internal silence, the emotional numbness. This was an artificial stillness, the kind that happens after drawers are emptied and furniture is rearranged. It was like the apartment was trying to pretend nothing had ever happened. Like it had been staged for someone else's life. Her stuff was gone. The closet was half empty, hangers twisted and tangled like they'd been pulled in haste. The bottom drawer of the dresser, the one where she kept all her mismatched pajamas, was completely missing. The bathroom shelves looked stripped bare. No bottles, no brushes, no makeup bag. Even her favorite necklace, the one she used to leave tangled on the nightstand, was gone. All that remained was a note. A single sheet of lined paper torn from a spiral notebook, left on the kitchen table like some kind of final audit. She'd titled it, Items Removed, as if we were in the middle of a divorce settlement instead of a breakup built on betrayal. There were bullet points. Check marks. Asterisks. Coffee machine, mine, gift from mom. Throw blanket, I paid for this, taking it. Patio chair, both agreed it was mine, per convo in June. Records, keeping anything pre-2018, you can keep the rest. Bookshelf lamp, doesn't match your side table. Coffee, you never drank it anyway. I read that last one twice. Coffee, you never drank it anyway. A half-used jar of coffee. Crossed off a list. It hit me harder than it should have. Because it wasn't just about the coffee. It was about how easy it was for her to reduce our shared life into bullet points, line items, assets and afterthoughts. It was how clinical she had become about something that used to be sacred. How she used a pen to carve up memories into possessions. What she wanted. What she didn't. At the bottom of the page, she'd scrawled one final line in a different pen like she'd written it as an afterthought. Enjoy being alone. Maybe that's what you wanted all along. That sentence. That one thin, passive-aggressive line, less than 10 words, hit harder than any fight we'd ever had. I don't know how long I stood there holding the paper. Long enough for the light through the kitchen blinds to shift. Long enough to feel my legs go stiff. Long enough to start remembering all the things she hadn't taken. The things she'd left behind not because they didn't matter, but because she knew they mattered to me. There was a shoebox on the top shelf of our closet. I'd nearly forgotten it existed. I pulled it down and brought it to the couch, sitting there for a moment before opening it. Inside was our history. Ticket stubs from the first concert we went to, both soaked in beer and barely legible. A dried flower from a beach trip 2 summers ago, pressed between pages of a book we never finished reading. A wristband from the street fair where we slow danced under a string of flickering lights. Photos, too. Dozens of them. Most candid, some blurry, all painful. I looked at each one like it was a message from another life. Smiles frozen in time. Hands held tight. Moments when I thought we were building something solid, something permanent. Lies. Not hers, this time mine. The lie I told myself that this would last. That love, once declared, could weather anything. That someone who said I choose you once would keep choosing you forever. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even get angry. I just closed the box and walked it down 3 flights of stairs to the dumpster behind our building. I didn't toss it. I set it down carefully like I was laying something to rest. No performance. No dramatic goodbye. Just closure. Then I went back upstairs, took a shower, and stripped the bed. Not because it smelled like her, but because it didn't. And that somehow felt worse. The next day, I started rearranging things. I pulled our couch to a different angle, opened all the windows, let air back in. I tossed the candles she left behind and donated the cookware we never used. I deleted the shared playlists. I unsubscribed from the monthly wine box she'd signed us up for and never drank from. I didn't do it out of spite. I did it because I needed to reclaim the space. Grief makes everything sacred for a while. Then it makes everything disposable. It's strange, the little things you end up mourning. Not the anniversaries. Not the big gestures. But the ordinary routines you didn't know meant anything until they were gone. Like how she used to hum when brushing her teeth. Or how she'd leave the bathroom light on by accident and I'd grumble about it until I started doing it myself out of habit. Like how she always overwatered the plant on the windowsill and insisted it was just extra love. The plant was dead now. I threw it out. That same afternoon, I found a new mug in the back of the cupboard. One I didn't remember buying. It said "Best Team Ever" in faded blocky font. I threw that out too. It wasn't until that evening, sitting on the floor with takeout and a half-watched episode of something I wasn't paying attention to, that it really sank in. This was it. It was over. Not just the relationship, but the version of me who tried to fix it. Who tried to ignore the signs. Who tried to earn the love of someone who had already checked out. And for the first time since everything collapsed, I felt something unexpected. Relief. Not the kind that comes with a win. Not triumph. Not satisfaction. But the kind that comes when the noise stops. When you're no longer bracing for another lie. Another excuse. Another night spent wondering what you did wrong. That's what she never understood. She didn't break me. She freed me. 2 weeks later, I moved into a small apartment near the train station. Nothing fancy, peeling paint, paper-thin walls, and a view of a parking lot, but it felt like mine. Brooke always hated this part of town. Said it was too noisy, too alive. That's exactly why I chose it. I wanted the noise. I wanted strangers talking loudly on the sidewalk and trains screeching by at odd hours. I wanted to feel like the world kept spinning, even if mine had stopped. The first night, I slept on a mattress on the floor with a pizza box beside me and no curtains on the windows. It should have felt depressing. It didn't. It felt like a reset. I started waking up early, running again, cooking simple meals. I stopped checking the time when I ate. I stopped waiting for her messages, stopped replaying every conversation in my head. One afternoon, I wandered into a tiny cafe with a bookshelf in the back. I picked up a novel I hadn't read since college. As I stood flipping through it, a woman beside me made a comment about the ending. I smiled. We talked for 5 minutes. No names, no numbers, no flirtation, just 2 people connecting over a story. That moment stayed with me. Not because it led to anything, but because for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel broken. I wasn't searching